which is a follow-up webinar of like last webinar. In last webinar, we talked a lot about how to create commercially successful innovations. But now you also want to build a profitable innovation portfolio. So what's the strategy behind that? And you know, what comes in there? That's what we're going to talk about today. Again, I need to look at the webcam again, and I'll try to look at the webcam as much as possible, but forgive me if I sometimes sweep around because I've got like two screens here. So let me first introduce myself. I've seen some familiar faces, but for the ones that do not know me, I'm Maarten van Kronenburg. I'm the owner and founder of BW Ventures, which I started about 5 years ago. I started my career in the music industry, which seems like a way off route. But the music industry for me was like a playground to learn a lot about entrepreneurship and especially about very quickly changing surroundings. I started my first record label when I was 19 years old, and in like 3 to 4 years, I gradually built that out to like 3 record labels, bookings agency, event agency, and a pretty prestigious blog, which was a sort of growth engine in between all of these activities. And what I learned there is what I apply still today in BW Ventures. I'm also an investment analyst for a seed investment fund, and over the past 5 years, we've helped, I think it's even over 200 right now, but we've helped a lot of innovation projects, and you will see some more of that today, and you will hear a lot of learnings out of that. So, floor is yours again, Lotte.
Welcome also from my side. My name is Lotte Geertse, and I'm responsible for the Entrepreneurial Lab at TMC. Actually, we're recording this session in our Entrepreneurial Lab environment, located at the TMC in Eindhoven at the High Tech campus. My background, I have been an innovation enthusiast for years now, and after diving into the market in a more business development setting, I now focus on the Entrepreneurial Lab within TMC, meaning that together with partners, clients, we tried to develop meaningful innovations that really make the world a little bit better by using complex technology and using the top-notch technological solutions. Not per se because technology is always the solution, but in many cases it's an important and enabling technology to make things happen. And besides that, I'm personally very active as a mentor at V Plus Male Tech Heroes and also co-founder of Female Founders Brabant. So, and luckily I got to know Maarten a few years ago, and we really complement each other in such a way that now today we are here at this webinar, and you will hear more about that soon.
Perfect. I'll continue here. So if we talk about innovation, we see that 54% of the executives are having trouble aligning the company strategy and tie it to an innovation strategy. So that means we've got a corporate strategy, but we also want to do innovation. How can we align the two? And the funny part is that 72% of the executive state that they are not out-competing or out-innovating, their competitors, which is kind of interesting because they want to align, but they do not have the feeling that they can out-innovate their competition. Now, what we see in like everything around innovation, and innovation is a very broad topic in this case, but we see like 4 main problem areas that, well, basically every company that we talk to has troubles in one of these categories. And the first problem category is like the selection criteria. What kind of selection criteria do I need to use to make the proper capital and resource allocation decision? So if I have a project, you know, it needs to have a proven traction, it needs to have a proven product, a strong IP strategy, and it needs to be scalable, both the business and the technology part. If that is not there yet, the key decision makers have a lot of trouble figuring out, you know, where do I need to place my bets. what we also see, and those two are like very aligned with each other, is where to allocate the resources, as in how many resources, how can I spread it over a portfolio? And there's always this, for innovation managers at least, the threat of just buying another company and integrating that. So M&A instead of just innovating yourself and building something new. Then if we look at the project itself, there's a lot of, causes that can fail your venture. There's no market need. There's an overinvestment in the early stage. You're lacking the right team skills, or you're prematurely scaling your project. Prematurely scaling, I mean, you do not know exactly what you need to develop for your clients, for your potential clients, and thus either scaling up marketing and sales without really knowing what to promise to the client, or building something that is not aligned with their problems or needs. And if you want to learn more about these topics, then I highly recommend you to go back into our last webinar, because I dive in deep there. Basically, this problem 3 category very deeply. Then the fourth one, it's for the corporates, it's quite hard to find the talented intrapreneurs that can lead the innovation projects. And last but certainly not least, if everything is figured out, so problem 1, problem 2, and problem 3 are figured out, then there's still this corporate strategy and a potential innovation project that is not aligned with the corporate strategy. And I've seen this happen quite often. They build something great that has a market potential, but then still the board of directors says it's not aligned to our corporate strategy after like 2 or 3 years. Let's just exit this innovation project. And that can either be a spin out, a sell, or they just literally kill the project. And we want to kind of avoid that. I'm not going to promise you that you will always avoid all these problems, because, hey, it's still innovation, but we can create a structure and a innovation strategy that helps you to, well, at least get past quite some of these problems. Now, what's interesting is some quotes of C-level or directors that we hear quite a lot. Like, we should innovate to outcompete the market. Probably some of you can recognize this. Or innovation should be used to experiment and be a creative process, right? Just be creative and something new will come out. But we think there is a way higher goal to that. And then, Lotte, I'd like you to step in here.
Yeah. So actually, our question to you is, as we promised you an interactive session, why should your job be about this? And also, what is your higher goal? Please feel free to think about that. And if you like to share, please feel free to share your answers in the chat with us, so that we can discuss that in 2 minutes.
Can everyone use the chat at this moment?
I guess so.
Yeah, I can use the chat. I'm just not clear about
So,
what you're asking.
yeah, what is the higher goal of innovation in your
From your perspective?
from your perspective?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks for your question, Mark. It's always good to really clarify that you understand well what is asked. So thanks.
It's a brain cracker, I guess.
Sorry, we should have warned you that we didn't didn't keep on asking only easy questions.
No. I think this also quite stresses the point, right, about these quotes that I used previously. I can't see the chat.
We already get several feedbacks coming in, Maarten, as Maarten can't see the chat. And the higher goal is to inspire employees or to inspire yourself, but also, for example, Simone explains to remain relevant in the future. And Dirk adds on that by saying, I want to give support and make the world a better and healthier place.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also see Sven joining us, stating that a higher goal is to accelerate the growth of the company by innovating as well as remaining at the forefront of technological development.
That's a very nice one.
So that's like a combination of both, and also about balance, if I understand Sven's answer correctly.
So a quick answer from my side. If you look at the most basic role of the board is to allocate capital and resources in the right places. And that is going to help you to sustain the business and let either the business grow or, you know, let the business continue. But innovation in itself, and what we want to achieve is not just having a sort of flatlined innovation projects that are either creative or that help you to outcompete others. But what you want to do with innovation is set up a lot of experiments to figure out how you can either extend the growth of your current product portfolio or basically create a new cycle that's going to help to survive in, well, the jungle out there. And the funny part is that there's a lot of side things going on, sort of extra catches, like you can attract more talented people, you can also attract more partnerships, you can also attract new joint ventures, but these are all sort of side things that happen if you structure your innovation well and if you successfully innovate. Now, as the people that joined our latest webinar also figured out, is that I'm really keen on making commercially successful innovations. So it's not just only about creating a great new technology, but you should also have a market that really wants to use and pay for that new innovation. And what we're going to talk about in this webinar is, again, the same core concept. Most innovation managers that we talk to fail not because they do not know what lean startup is, they do not know how to do design thinking, build a fantastic team, or create great products, or do stakeholder management, but most of them conduct these activities in the wrong order and lack a dedicated and measurable sequence to achieve a positive return on investment on their portfolio. And that positive return on investment on their total portfolio is in the end what the C-level will look at. Because again, they want to allocate resources and capital in the right places. And that makes the company grow or stay sustainable, or sustain at least. Now, to quickly show some case studies, for example, Brightlands, we've helped Brightlands set up a startup portfolio of 15 startups within 1.5 years. We created the innovation strategy, or in that case, more of the investment strategy to create that first portfolio. The other one was BW Ventures helping TMC during COVID. So at the start of COVID, we initiated quite quickly 4 projects. We started with 7 projects and filtered out to 4 projects. And these 4 projects alone had like 600K plus in value within 3.5 months. And value can be also named as revenue because it was pure revenue coming in. The basics here was we started with a strategy and then focused on the individual projects. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. So some of our clients, these are combined clients from TMC and from BW Ventures. And these are the 11 steps that we're going through. You do not have to read them all because I'm going to explain them step by step. But it starts with creating laser sharp focus and...
Yeah, And good for you to know that besides being able to have the recording afterwards, we will also share all the slides afterwards. So please, indeed, don't be busy with writing everything down or making screenshots. As we believe in open innovation, we also believe in sharing the information. So you will receive all the details from us. That maybe
Yeah, perfect.
Them too.
Perfect addition. So for us, it all starts with creating a laser sharp focus, and we will end with getting a grow from the executives. And there are about 10 steps in between, and I'm going to explain every single step. So as I just mentioned, it all starts with creating a laser sharp focus, and it's on purpose that we called this step, step 0. What we want everyone to really embrace is that innovation needs time to prove its success. And we see too many managers that want to see an innovation that immediately succeeds, so that in the same year they can already see a break-even point or already making profits. In some cases that could be working. It's like Horizon 1. We're going to explain that in a minute. But most of them, it's gonna take longer, right? It's gonna take 3, maybe 5, and even 7 years, depending on what kind of technologies you're using. I'm gonna dive into that later. Changing your plans often is gonna fill your complete portfolio. So if you're gonna ride every technology wave, and every single time a new technology pops up and you think your complete strategy needs to change to that new technology, it's a guarantee for a failing innovation portfolio. Because it's not about riding all these technology waves, it's about delivering value to potential clients or to new markets, and thus in the end building a more sustainable company, right?
And we got one question that relates to that, Maarten. A question from Dirk asking: is a successful innovation in this seminar based on financial worth?
Good one. So commercially successful ventures for me are either ventures that create a lot of financial gains in the longer run. So that, for example, can completely change the starting business model, like iPhone did for Apple, or the App Store did for Apple. But you can also think about successful innovations that deliver a huge savings on other parts of the existing business. So if you change, for example, the complete what's that called again, the supply chain, and within that supply chain you're able to make huge savings, that could also be a very commercially successful innovation. But in the end, it is a sort of financial measure, but not in like the first or the second year. So that's always the balance that you want to look at.
And I also heard you say value, because we also created value, but value can be you can put a number there. And I also heard you say sustainable growth. Is that then also as important as the financial aspects?
And that all depends on the strategy. Because yes, you can do sustainable innovation. You can also just innovate to, for example, attract new people. Yeah. But this is exactly why you want to create one strategy for a longer term. A typical innovation strategy is set out for like 5 up to 10 years. And within these 5 to 10 years, you're not constantly changing that strategy, because if you're constantly changing, the portfolio is not going to work out because your focus is continuously shifting. What you want to do, and that's why the strategy is so important, is you want to create a sort of domain dominancy and expertise. Like I used to, if you're in the stock market, you would like to compound your investment, right? It's the compounding effect that's gonna help you make bigger gains. In innovation, it's the same thing. You're creating this sort of compound effect of learnings in that domain, in that area, and that can be in learnings about the market, about technology, about people, about the environment. But you want to create that compounding effect of learnings, and that's what you're going to achieve if you focus on that same strategy for a longer period of time.
And the thing that Dirk is now adding in the chat is that he, besides liking a good business model, he believes that it becomes more and more important to also have an impact business model as well.
Definitely.
So that was
Definitely. Yeah. It's most of the companies that we work with are focusing on ESGs, etc., combined with a good business model.
SROE.
Combined. So it's not just only ESGs, but it should be combined with ROI, because otherwise I believe that in 5 years everything is still going to be cut out, because in the end you need to create some gains.
That's why the laser sharp focus is so important.
Exactly. So what we want to create at the end of this strategy is a laser sharp focus. And this is just well, the first step is everyone needs to understand that we need to have that focus. Otherwise, we're constantly changing. So how do we start with that? The first thing that we want to do is assess the current situation of the organization. And this feels like an open door because probably everyone knows how to do a SWOT analysis, etc., etc. But what we fail to understand is what were our greatest innovations? What helped us to really gain that spot? What failed? Why did it fail? What processes or steps or activities did we use that did not work out? Combined with the fact that you want to figure out what is making the biggest gains in our company right now, what are the biggest trends in and outside our company, but also which products or which technologies are at the end of their life cycle. And the first two questions, most of them can answer that, but the other questions are as important to understand what is our East situation right now. I think this is the most boring step of all, but it is crucial to later, create a very good strategy. How we do this in practice, when we come into a new company, the first thing that we do is do about 20 to 40 interviews with all sorts of people that have an influence to the innovation activities. And we want to read a lot about what the current corporate strategy is, because it needs to be aligned in some way. Some basic questions, like really, really basic questions that will help you to figure out at least, what is our current situation at this moment. So the second step, if we understand what our current situation is, we're going to pick a playing style, our innovation playing style. And this is crucial to understand where we're going to focus our attention and what are we going to do. The first playing style is protecting. We're going to protect the current company. Funny part is, most of the companies that need to transform think they first need to protect the company, and the ones that think everything is fine are going to transform their company, but they should protect the company. So what's the difference between the two? If you at this moment have staggering growth rates, if you've got almost no competition, if your margins are very high, if you have enough, basically growth still coming in, you need to protect that growth. And that growth can be, for example, protected because you're going to level up your ESG standards in all the products, etc., or you're going to protect by adding more features in that same ecosystem. But it's all there to protect what is growing right now. The other part is transforming. It's literally the opposite. So if margins are going down, if you see more and more competitors coming in, if you see that you're losing potential markets and it's hard to attract new talent, then it's time to transform your company by having a transformative innovation strategy. Now, the key here is to pick one and try not to focus on both of them, because it's not going to work out. You can't and protect and transform the company at the same time. More on that in a minute. Because we've got a question for you.
Yep. This is where we want you to interact with us again. Related to what Maarten just explained about protecting and transforming and the fact that you can't do both at the same time, we are wondering what do you think? What do you think that was the playing style of Apple back in 2005? So just let us know by using the chat. What do you think the playing style of Apple was back in 2005?
You see the answers coming in, right?
I think they're thinking very hard.
I can imagine that.
Protect or transform? This is a very easy question, only 2 answers. Was it protect or transform? Because we just learned that you can't do both. So which one is it? I see one vote for protect so far and 2 votes for transform. Oh, now it's 2-2. Oh yeah, okay, now I need to go and just... It's really mixed.
That's interesting.
Protect.
I hear a lot of...
So far we have more transform than protect.
Okay.
Yeah, so far more.
Pick one that chose protect, and the person can unmute him or herself to explain why you think it's protect.
Well, Sven, if you are willing to join us, you were the first to say protect. If you would like to explain and elaborate on that, you're very welcome. Hi, it's Sven.
Hi, good afternoon. Well, it was kind of a joke. So this is just at the forefront of Apple introducing the first iPhone. But this is right about the time that they had to do something because they were not going to cut it with their Apple computers. So in my mind, it could be both. But I'm happy to hear your views.
Yeah, I also would love to hear someone that picked transform. And
well, we got Mark. Mark was the first one to explain that it should be transform. Maybe Mark, would you like to elaborate on your answer?
Sure. Well, I think this was not long after Steve Jobs retook over the role. It was, I think, just after the iPod and just before the iPhone. So I think that was the time of real innovation where, yeah, they had to make a change.
So let's go back one slide and let's elaborate on this. So the funny part is it is transform, but exactly for the reasons that I already forget the name. Was it Sven? No, Sven. That Sven explained. Meaning Apple was really losing market shares. They really had to change the company. They fully focused on transforming Apple, and that's where first the iPod came in, then iTunes came in, and then they saw a massive opportunity to combine like the phone with the iPod, and not just the iPhone with like the iPhone itself, but the App Store behind that were the major drivers of transformation for Apple. They were back then in a transformative strategy. What they did was allocate more percentages of their R&D budgets and other resources into building propositions, building technology that was going to be successful in 5 to 7 years, instead of just focusing on innovations that they can upgrade their current product portfolio. So it was the right reason for Sven to say it, like the reasons he mentioned were right, but that is the transformative playing style. Now,
we got one question about this topic, because Simone is questioning, aren't you too late if you start transforming when you're already in decline?
Very good question. Yes, you're too late. especially if you're on the downtrend for years already. But if you're measuring this right, if you are sort of data driven, you can catch up in time. So what you see at Microsoft is going on right now. When they first launched Microsoft, they were only protecting the company. Then Microsoft itself needed to expand their horizons. Then they got into a transformational strategy. They saw again declining of new users and new downloads or new buyings coming in, and they started to transform again into the whole cloud thing. Now the whole cloud has been protected, and what they're trying to do right now is again transform with a new strategy. So if you're doing this properly, you should continuously riding the waves of protecting and transforming. However, most of the companies that we see that want to start with such an innovation strategy, almost everyone that we talk to they need a transformative innovation strategy. They just need it because otherwise they do not feel the pain to start working with us. However, they should have done that like 3 or 4 years ago. But if we start right now and we hope to, catch up somewhere, and this is in their DNA, they should be able to then, catch on to protect quickly and then to transform again. Last example of this, Google. At this moment, the only strategy they have is protecting the current model of Google, because everything they build is part of the current Google ecosystem. And how these resources are divided, I'm going to explain a few slides later, because even for Google, that doesn't mean that they're not investing in transformative stuff, but the real focus is on protecting Google right now. More on that in a sec, because we also want to involve your company.
Of course. So after practicing a little bit with the app example and mentioning Microsoft and Google, your company and your role is as important as the big tech giants. So what do you think is your innovation playing style at this moment?
And here you also have the option that there's no playing style at all.
Yeah, so here you have the third option, that you didn't choose a playing style so far. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. Got me questioning meanwhile, Maarten, to really get a better grasp on when is that tipping point. So when to switch from protect to transform, or again, to switch from transform to protect. I can imagine that.
Yeah, I think that is more of an art than a science. And I think that has a lot to do with how well you're sensing like the growth of your company, and when growth it's still growth, but when growth is slowing down too much. And that I don't think that's a science. Yeah.
But when the growth is not as steep or as fast.
What can be interesting here, and I'm not going to dive into that too much, but is to have a look at Tencent. Tencent, the Chinese company that started WeChat, they're called a spawner at this moment, and I think that is the optimum of everything that you can do with innovation. I'm not going to dive into that too much, but if you want to hear,
other type of example is Tencent.
Tencent, and then especially look for videos from Monish Pabrai about Tencent.
Okay, we will try to put that in the chat later for you, as otherwise it's not a super easy name.
No, it's not an easy name.
In the meantime, we get some questions coming in, or some answers coming in. Simone explaining that they try to be transformative, but we aren't in agreement whether we should do that. ... And Mark is adding from his side, he currently works at ASML, and he thinks ASML is both, because he puts a question mark there.
Mm-hmm.
He thinks protect, because they are a market leader and they lead also on the aspect of innovation, so constant new technology. What do you think is Mark's question?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that in a few slides, because I think this is a very good example.
Yeah, ASML is of course a very an example close by. It's literally only 8 kilometers from here. Sander is explaining that it can be two strategies depending on the location: protect in NL, transform abroad. Is that also an option? That's what Sander is thinking. And we have Dirk from the Tilburg University, and he thinks they have no style as an organization, but individual researchers are curious, they explore, and they want to create breakthroughs in existing markets. So then that's a transform, but that's then from an individual point of view.
Yep.
And last but not least, we have Sven explaining that Settles, the company Settles, where he works at, should be able to protect, in a sense. That's what they need to stay at the forefront of technological development. They need to do that well so they can continue to grow. And the way we act as a company will transform, but he currently does not see they need to transform apart from staying on top of relevant trends. That's all the input so far. So a lot of thoughts also. I see the answers are a little bit longer, which is very understandable because this is something really to think through and to walk through. Maybe your first.
With remind me of ASML when I'm in the portfolio slides, because that's a very good example to show what ASML, in my opinion, is doing right now and how could that work. And I think at that moment it's also wise to talk a little bit about Intel, because Intel is also a very interesting company at this moment to see what is going on there. Yeah. So let's go to the casino. If you're going to play roulette, would you always bet on one number?
I would.
Let's see what the real gamblers are here.
Okay, so the question is to you. If you play roulette, would you always bet on one number? Dirk says yes. Simon says no, I won't. Sven, yes, but only a number that was already on the wheel before.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Yeah.
Probably not, says Florian.
So, of course, I'm making fun here, but what we see in reality is that
a very technical answer from Mark. He's of course also a technical guy. I know him. Roulette doesn't matter. All the numbers have equal chance. I wouldn't bet. Only the casinos win.
Yeah, perfect. That's even better. That's even better. Just go to the stock market. Yeah. So I'm making fun of this, but in reality, let's not say every company that we come, but about 70% of the companies that we help, even though they understand that it is not wise to just pick one innovation project and go full in on that, 70% is still doing that. And that's not going to help you to build a lasting innovation portfolio. If we look at the Capgemini research, the funny part is that about 60% of all the innovation efforts do not return anything. About 20%, and the numbers that you see here is a combination of Capgemini and what we see in practice. So the 80 to 90% of innovation efforts fail to deliver is literally from Capgemini. The other ones are the ones that we see in practice. So full loss is about 60%, medium loss is about 20%, and with a medium loss, I mean half of your money is gone. So sometimes you can get back some money by having some sales or selling the proposition to another company, but that's about 20%. About 14% is a medium profit, so that's a multiplier of 1 to 2. Substantial profit is about 5%, and that really brings in 5 times the money. And a large profit is about 1% of all the innovations that you do. So how big is our chance that if we just bet on one project, that we're going to bring back the money of that one investment? It's too low. That doesn't mean that you should go full ham on 100 projects, because that's the opposite of that. It's about, and that's again our previous webinar, it's about beginning very small and then in the right stages allocate more and more and more capital to it. So you de-risk in a super early stage, and by de-risking and killing projects quickly, the good ones are still out there, and you can double down on these bets, like you kind of do with blackjack, if we still talk in the casino thing there.
Dirk has a question related to this table that you're showing, because he's wondering, how do you see this in relation to the laser sharp focus that you mentioned as the first?
A very good question. Let's go into the next slides, because I'm going to answer this in the next slides, because like the reason of understanding that you should place multiple bets is because one of the key like objections that we hear a lot from boards is that, yeah, but it's just easier to buy that one company that already has some sort of revenue coming in, just buy it and we've got a new market. Or shouldn't we just focus on that one little project and we're just going to put one massive bet on there? And I've heard this too many times. And that's not going to work. It feels good in the short run because everyone is working on one thing and it's super sharp focus, but the strategy should have a focus and not focused like all the resources on one project. So if we're then talking about these innovation projects, we see that in the portfolio there's no sharp focus, and that focus is either too futuristic. So we're just building enabling technologies over and over and over again, which is not going to make any money today. Or it's focused on too much small changes, which is we want to transform, but basically what we're doing is just upgrading our current product portfolio and just creating a sort of service around that.
So
but it's not,
little crumbs.
Yeah, it's little crumbs. It's like a one to 2 year horizon.
Yeah.
And what you want to do is spread everything on this ambition matrix. I think some of you are known with the Horizon model, Horizon 1, 2, and 3. Like Horizon 1 is like 1 to 2 years, and it's basically core innovations. Horizon 2 is, it has an horizon of 3 to 5 years to do innovation, and then like Horizon 3 is 7 to 10 years. We like to work a little bit more with the innovation ambition matrix, because this tells us more, not just about the timelines, but about the ambitions that you have in either the markets that you want to go into, which is the vertical axis, or the technologies that you want to use or create in the technological axis. That's the horizontal axis. Sorry, I keep mixing these up even now. So if we look at the core innovations, these are the innovations that you focus on when you're protecting your company. So if you're going to protect your company, you want to place multiple bets in your core products, upgrading the current products, or expanding in your current market. Then the adjacent innovations are either focused on markets that are adjacent to the market that you're working on right now. For example, if you're focusing on geographical markets and you start in the Netherlands, then the adjacent market would be Germany and Belgium, as an example. But if you're focused on first, let's say, children in the age of 5 to 10, then the adjacent market would be children from 10 to 15 years old, as an example here. If you're looking at technologies, you're going to use new technologies in the same markets. So it's not just creating a new market, you're using different technologies, different products that you're going to use to serve the market that you're already in. And it's always a balance between these two. That's what we call the adjacent innovations. And the total transformational innovations are the ones that you create completely new markets. These markets do not even exist. Think about Airbnb when they once started. Think about the App Store when they started. But also think about the technology that they're using. Sometimes it's just completely new technology. ASML, for example, when they started out, they came out with a completely new sort of transformational technology right now. And that's going back to the answer that that someone already gave. Right now, they're focusing on protecting the core of the company, but they already know that they also need to place some small bets in the transformational areas, because we all understand that once the smallest nanometer chip is created, we need to have some kind of new technology to build even faster or quicker processors. And I'm going to show that in a minute. If we now look at Intel, Intel is far behind. So because they're far behind, they now need to focus a lot more on the transformational and adjacent innovations, and not just on core innovations. I see some people like looking, what is he trying to say? But I can't see the chat again. I think there are some questions.
Simone is questioning, as a guideline for this model, often 70-20-10 % of spreading the effort. Yeah, I know what slide's coming next. Is used by choosing protect or transform. Do you look different to this guideline? Simone, I promise you, we will in 1 or 2 slides we will.
We're gonna, yeah.
Because we want to discuss that topic as well. Now back to you, and I really like so far. I really like the high level of interaction that we have with each other by using the chat and also using your explanations live in this webinar. So again, a question to you: what do you think is a common risk spread? And actually, Simone, you don't need to answer anymore because you already answered. Simone thinks 70-20-10. But let us know, what are your thoughts? How to spread the percentages of your resources? How would you ideally spend them? And you would divide them over core innovations, adjacent and transformational innovations. And Martha wants to add on that.
And Simone, I'm going to make it a bit more difficult for you. What if you are a truly transformative company? How would that look like? How would you spread your portfolio?
Mark agrees on Simone, 70-20-10.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest is, I see several people typing. So
perfect.
We're working on the answer. And please, in the meantime, don't hesitate if you want to add, comment, or ask another type of question other than the questions that we have ready for you that we want to discuss as a group, also to learn and share knowledge amongst all of us. So while Brechtje is wondering, isn't it depending on the sector or market as well? And Simone states that still the most in core, I think, but maybe 50-30-20, related to your question earlier. For settles, it would be 40-50-10 is what Sven is explaining.
Mm-hmm.
And Simone adds on her answer by stating that the organization design will be different, transformational more in the lab compared to protect. And then Dirk does not answer the question yet, but he has a question back to us. What's the difference between adjacent and transformational innovations?
Go on with, so again, adjacent is to expand into adjacent markets. You're not going to create a fully new market. It's an already existing market that you think you can enter with having just a little bit different of a product or just a little bit different of a technology. What we see happen a lot is that you get inspired by different industries and you apply these technologies to, for example, go into the low cost part of your market. So Renault did that with buying Dacia. That was a perfect example of an adjacent sort of innovation for Renault. So
yep.
Simone already, how do you say that in Dutch? In English? Gas voor de voeten wegmaaien. No, it's fine.
Mark is the one to know the English verb for this. Not verb, saying.
You have to repeat
It's
it.
fine.
I'm not sure what you're saying.
It's fine.
We're
So
making a joke here.
if you
But actually, if there were gifts to, if there were things to win, then Simone would have won, like let's say, a bottle
the
of wine.
refrigerator, the refrigerator.
A bottle of wine for her answer. But please elaborate a bit more.
Yeah, so what we see as a rule of thumb, and that's also what McKinsey, they wrote the model, a rule of thumb for spreading your efforts is exactly 70, 20, and 10%. However, if you're really transforming the company and you really need to do something, and that's what you see with Facebook at this moment and their metaverse, is that all of their innovation and R&D budget is like almost switched up. It's for Facebook, I think at this moment it's 30% in core, about 30% adjacent, and the rest is fully focused on transforming with the metaverse. If you look back at Apple back then, it was 40, 20, 40. And that's interesting because it depends, it does not only depend on the market or the sector that you're in. It depends on the current situation of your company and the risk appetite that you have. And you can't measure that in your market because it's you that wants to change that market. It's you that wants to come out on top. And that means that you need to balance sort of what is the risk appetite, what is the risk that we can take to really innovate or transform. And that question is a question that only the internal people can answer or potential shareholders can answer. And it's no one from the outside.
And how would you answer a risk, the level of risk appetite in your company? How would you answer?
That depends, one, on the maturity of the company in innovation. So if you have a quite mature rate of innovation and you've done multiple projects which are successful, then the risk appetite gets a little bit better.
You want to eat more of that?
Yeah, you want to eat more of that. But if the risk appetite, like if you haven't done a lot of innovation in, for example, adjacent and core and transformative markets, then first start just with adjacent markets because you want to adjust to the process and get it into your DNA. And then you see, the companies that succeed, they accelerate and put more and more effort into transformational.
So if I understand you correctly, then you first need to get comfortable with the uncomfortable and not get to the super uncomfortable.
Yeah, and even more, getting comfortable with money that comes back 2, 3, or even 4 years later, and not immediately. And that is crucial here.
That can also be uncomfortable.
That can get. Now it's not really comfortable, but it's again that role of the board that needs to allocate capital. And if they have, if the core is under, there's a threat or something coming up in the core business, then all focus is going there. But in the meantime, you should also adjust to that sort of new way of working that you still need to innovate and create these new models and technologies. Yeah. And then especially if you look at how innovation pays the bills, it's only 10% of all the innovation ROI comes from core innovations, and 70% comes from the transformational innovations. And we can explain this a lot, but you're really gonna experience this if you see this happening in reality, and that is going to help to shift that culture around.
We have one question from Simone about that.
Mm-hmm.
Simone, if you want to relate in your own question, then feel free, but I'll at least repeat your question. Simone is wondering because she finds it difficult always with the innovation portfolio versus the organization project portfolio, and the core is not done from innovation budgets or resources, at least as far as she's seen. So how do you look at that?
The core, I think I missed a little bit of the question there.
What she finds, if you want to elaborate, Simone, you feel free. Yeah,
let's try and have a little bit of noise here in the streets. Like if I look at the total of all projects, so innovation projects and also other projects, so we say the core projects, the improvements are done by a project portfolio, and the adjacent and the transformational projects are done by the innovation team or innovation budget.
Yep. I'm gonna pause you there for a second because I'm gonna get back to this sort of structure a little bit later on. What's most important of this step is to really assess your risk appetite as the company. And that's not just one person. You need to involve multiple people to assess that risk appetite. Because if you think it's higher than it really is, it's gonna how do you say that? It's gonna slow down all the decision making, etc., later on. So most important, assess the risk appetite. Now, if we assess the risk appetite and we understand our current situation of the company, it's important to start creating an ecosystem map. And you see one ecosystem map here that is built around the mantelzorger, which is a caregiver in freely translated in English. And what the purpose of such an ecosystem map is to figure out where is our potential customer sitting, where are we as a company, and which other important stakeholders of the client are in that ecosystem, and how far away or how big or how close are they to that, person in the middle. Why is that so important? Because if you created an ecosystem, you understand where you stand and where you would like to be, it's easier to scape out what you're going to focus on. We use this for Dela because we do focus on caregivers, so mantelzorgers. We scaped out that we're not going to focus on this part, which is the hospitals and the pharmaceuticals, for example. We're not going to build any houses, so we're not going to do innovation on this part here, if you see my mouse. But what we're going to focus on is the bureaucracy, the social cohesion, and any technology that can help the caregiver in their homes. And that helps in focusing our innovation strategy. And that's, again, going back to your question, Dirk. So this is going to help focusing where in the ecosystem am I going to be active and what is out of focus. Now, if we've done that and we understand where in the ecosystem we want to play, we can also understand on which levers of innovation we're going to focus on. And I mean, this is not too old, or this is like older, but not too old. We see two parts of the innovation, the business model innovation and technology innovation. I think everyone can agree to that. But within that, we see 6 levers. So in the business part, it's about either creating new value propositions, so a new promise to a client. We're going to change something in the supply chain. So it's not the end user that is going to get a new promise, but it's something in that supply chain that we're going to change or that we're going to innovate. Or we're going to completely change our our target customer group. The other part in technology is from a product that we can, get in our hands to the enabling technologies that enable the chip making to then go into a computer, and that computer can be used by an end user. What you want to do, if you understand where in the ecosystem we're playing, you understand how your company is growing and where what kind of knowledge is in the company, it's quite easy to scape out what you're not going to do. So, for example, Dela is never going to focus on enabling technologies. They're never going to create the new enabling technologies that can create new chips. They're never going to create the enabling or the new technologies for new pharmaceuticals. But what they are going to do is focus on supply chain innovations, value proposition innovations, and new products and services for the caregivers. This sharpens your focus even more. So we do know where we stand. We understand if we want to play to protect our company or play to transform our company. We understand that we need to place multiple bets. We also understand where in our potential ecosystem that we defined as an opportunity want to play. And we understand on which levers of innovation we're going to focus on. Now we also want to understand how can I manage the full process then? Because, okay, I get where I want to innovate, but now how am I going to manage that? First things first. We've made a lot of choices already. And what we want to do right now is create what we call guiding and fundamental principles. Guiding principles are, fundamental principles are rules of innovation that can't be touched. We're not going to focus on enabling technologies. Can't be touched. Fundamental rule. No discussion about that. This is one of the most important things that's going to help you to stay focused on this one strategy. I used this example, I think, in the past webinar as well, but one of the, well, for me, sort of riskiest things that happen is there was a very cool golf match. The C-level comes back, they heard a new technology coming in, and they just pushed that new technology ID into the innovation team. That's not going to help. With these fundamental rules, and these fundamental rules are also like signed off literally by the C-level, we do know that this is never a discussion. So if it's out of scope, it's out of scope. We're not going to touch it. We're not going to put any resources to it.
So you leave the ideas on the golf course at the golf course.
Exactly that. Then we've got guiding principles, because the guiding principles, of course, it's innovation. So you will probably also have discussions like how mature is the technology? How big is the market? Is it big enough? Yes or no? These are sort of principles that you can discuss with each other. But we want to define when is it immediately a hard no, and what are the rules to have a discussion on continuing with these innovations. And we like to, well, split these principles into, especially if you're investing in external teams, but also if you create the internal team, is this team the right team to make this innovation project a success? Traction. Are you getting enough traction? How big should the traction look like? You know, that is important. Technology. Can your technology be ready in like half a year, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years? It's a sort of, well, how you say that? It's a principle that you use. So if you do want to focus on enabling technologies, you know, it's going to take 10 years, then let it work and do the R&D for 10 years. It needs to be scalable, or how scalable is it? You know, do you want a market that goes into the billions, or is innovation in a million market also fine? Or are you creating a ESG kind of proposition that is not too scalable, but really helps to bring down the footprint of the company? I mean, these are all guiding principles that you put into some sort of a rule book. And that's what we think is super important, because it's going to help everyone to speak in the same language, to make the same decisions, and to have a fixed strategy for longer periods of time, instead of just 1 year and then switching everything over.
Yeah, probably you can guess by now that this is again where you come in, because we're very curious to know from your side, from your company and your role, which criteria do you use to decide to continue with an innovation project? And of course, you can take into account what was just explained by Maarten. And as I would love to give you some time to answer your questions, We also have a question from Erwin that came in the meantime.
Hi, Erwin.
And Erwin is asking, could you say also regarding to the fundamental principles, define what you want to instead to avoiding projects? Shorter list maybe.
Yes, it's a balance between the two. So you've got an ambition to go somewhere. You've got a sort of vision where you think things will go to. And these can be described more into a sort of innovation manifesto. That's where we want to go to. But what we've learned is that where you want to go to can be too fuzzy. So also definitely scape out what you're not going to do, because knowing what not to do is going to help you to focus on the stuff that you want to do. And of course, again, that is based on the ecosystem, and that is based on the levers of innovation, because otherwise it's going to be a very long list of the stuff that you do not do.
In the meantime, we have a lot of people typing their answers, and I think they will come in very shortly. Mm-hmm. So we are still wondering which criteria do you use to decide to continue with an innovation project? We have people typing, but no answers yet to be. Yeah. We have whether the manager likes it.
That's a perfect one. I hope this
stickiness likable, yeah.
I hope for Simone this is partly joking, but looking at just the screen, I don't think it's just joking.
The thing is, she's not only joking.
No.
Sven explains that a project stops when the results are reached and no new results are formulated. But deciding to stop when the results are not reached yet is harder. Part is gut feeling, part is motivation of the team, whether there are still sparks of inspiration that keep the fire burning. And Dirk also talks about sparks, because he talks about the sparks that thrives the front runners in his answer. And we also again have Aaron typing.
Yeah, well, a quick reaction. I love metrics. Metrics to measure, for example, your traction growth. It's not about the absolute measure of traction, but it's about, what is going on? What kind of experiments do you run? What kind of results do you get out of that? And are the metrics like going into the right direction? For example, in marketing and sales, it doesn't matter, especially in the first 2 years, to just measure the absolute amount of sales. It's way more important to figure out how much am I spending to get that one client in, and how much does that client return, for example, if we're talking about marketing and sales. If you're talking about technology, like the version 1 product that you build, are people still using that product? How many people, has a retention sort of rate compared to that? Now, hold your horses, because of course, there's a lot of phases in that innovation funnel. And every funnel should have their own criteria to get into a next stage. And well, this is just a quick screenshot. We use this ourselves a lot if we want to scout for startups that we want to help and potentially invest in with an investor. But also at Dela, we created these guiding and fundamental principles in a sort of form online. So if you're just going through, you can already see how well you're scoring on the fundamental and guiding principles that you created. But this is just an example. Now, what I just mentioned is the different phases of innovation, and every innovation phase should have its own criteria. And these criteria are linked to where you want to play and how you want to play. So protective or transformative, and where in the ecosystem you want to play. Because if you're transforming, the horizon is longer, and thus the measurements are going to be different for these types of innovation projects. However, the most important part is that you discuss upfront how much time are we going to get, and when are we successful or not. And these again are part of your fundamental and guiding principles. Now, we have created this set of rules, and we've chosen some of the cool projects that are in our ecosystem. Now, how are we going to create these projects? So getting from, okay, strategy, where do I want to go? What do I want to do? Now we need to define how the innovation process is going to look like for your company.
Yes, and oh yeah, and I will answer, and I will, yeah, I will want to bring in one question while the rest can think about the next question. So, relating to what Maarten just explained, how would these activities relate to an innovation strategy? Creating an incubator, collaborating in ecosystems, attending or organizing, or both, hackathons, discovering lean startup, and practicing design thinking. How do these activities relate to innovation strategy? Please elaborate on that and share that with us. And then in the meantime, we can discuss the question we got from Simona, because she was wondering, isn't it also different for the different horizons? For the core innovations, the business case is okay, but for the transformational ones, that's killing. Do you make a difference there?
Definitely. And I think I just tipped on that answer like a few minutes ago, as in the core, but I will come back to that in a minute. What we see happen often is that the core is just being created in the operational teams, the teams that are just working with the existing clients. The adjacent and transformational innovations are created with innovation teams. And these innovation teams for an adjacent innovation have a different time horizon and a different resources that they can allocate, because typically the adjacent innovations will succeed in 3 to 5 years. You will see, traction gaining harder or quicker and quicker there, and the technology is being used more and more by, these new clients. That means that the timelines and the KPIs that you set in your sort of funnel or strategy are going to be a little bit different for your adjacent innovations compared to the transformative innovations. And what we see a lot in real transformative innovation is that a lot of R&D is involved. So the steps that you take before you get, especially with enabling technologies, before you get into projects that are ready to market, there's even like a bigger pipeline before you start involving the market.
Thanks for that answer, Maarten. In the meantime, we did give everyone some time to type some answers, but I think they were too busy listening to what we were explaining.
I'm just gonna.
So we don't have any answers on this question so far. So I think it's good. Also, with respect of time, it's good to continue. And
yep.
Of course, we want to wrap up.
So what is important here is that we see a lot of activities here, creating an incubator, creating or collaborating in ecosystems, attending or organizing all sorts of hackathons. They're just one activity in the complete innovation system. And every activity has their own sort of horizon in time, and they all have their own purpose. So, for example, a hackathon is mainly used to discover new ideas. A corporate accelerator is to really develop the internal project to something that is worth, investing in more. If you're just using M&A, it's a sort of acquisition tool in your full arsenal of tools to achieve the strategy that you've set out. What we see in practice, however, is that a company focuses just on organizing hackathons, or they just create an incubator, or they just buy other companies. But you should create that mix, and that mix is going to help you to reach that goal. And that brings me to, for me, basically the most important step of all the steps that we've done. We've made a lot of choices. We have a better understanding of what we want to achieve, but now we need to orchestrate our innovation system. And the innovation system is everything about how you are going to achieve the strategy that you've set out, and what kind of activities are you going to deploy, in what stage of the innovation, and what kind of budgets, etc., are going to be allocated to these individual projects in the different phases, combined with all the rules, etc. So probably your mind is exploding right now. You're like, what is he trying to say here? Let me get a visual here. This for us is a sort of basic model as a context on what an innovation system should look like. And that starts from the fundamental, creating that innovation strategy. Where and how am I going to innovate? Then if we understand where in the ecosystem we want to be, we understand in which ecosystems we want to be active. So for example, the caregiving example, it makes a lot of sense to go to universities that do a lot in caregiving, in health, right? It doesn't make a lot of sense to be active in petrochemical plants, for example. And this sounds super weird, but we've seen this happening. We've seen one of the bigger electronic companies, or sorry, the utility companies, being active in wine delivery services. Like, I don't see how that is going to ever match up, right? If we want to reach out internally or externally, we at least know what kind of questions we're going to set out. If we want to do the due diligence, we have a set of rules that we can go back to. Then if we want to form the project, we know what kind of people we want to have in that project. We understand the timelines for that specific project, and we can involve an investment committee or an innovation committee there who gives you the first go to start really validating the process. I've explained the pre-acceleration and acceleration program in the other webinar, so I would really advise to go back to that webinar and watch it. But it basically means discovering if the proposition really is technical and commercially feasible, and if that is right, then move into accelerating, building the actual product, scaling your marketing and sales activities to actually, well, gain traction and see what's going on. And the funny part is that we see that most of the projects fit into that 12 to 1 year schedule. And then there's the bigger decision coming in. Do we need to allocate way more capital to it? Do we need to do more acquisitions in the growth strategy for that one innovation project? Or do we just need to kill everything and it's over? So I'm gonna skip the question, I guess, because we have 6 more minutes left, and I just want 2 more steps to take here. So what we hear a lot is that the CFO or the controllers are the biggest enemy of innovation, and I do not fully agree to that. We know that everyone says that they are the biggest enemy, but if you involve them and you make a budget that you can stick to, they can be your best friends in the innovation system. But what you want to do, if you have scaped out or you've worked out the innovation system, you can also budget the different steps in your system. For example, for exploration, you're not going to spend more than 2K. For selection or forming like a project or signing contracts, you're not going to spend more than 2K. For example, in the just validation phase or discovery phase, you're not going to spend more than 25K. And if that is true, and you have an exception because it's going to cost a little bit more, the only thing that you do then is go back to that controller or go back to that CFO and ask for permission to raise more capital from them. And if you do that, it's easier to underline and explain why you need more money than the typical system that you created. And this helps everyone to make decisions easier until the point that you're in the last part of your system, which is basically scaling and integrating, to then raise capital for individual business cases. Now, what's the biggest threat for your innovations? It's having a fuzzy language. So the board of directors or any stakeholder in the company does not understand what the, like for example, discovery is in innovation, or what acceleration is in innovation. You want, if you have created your innovation system with the right budgets, it's super important to communicate what your system is. If someone has an idea, where do they need to go to? If an idea is progressing, what stage is there? And in that stage, what kind of KPIs do I want to get at? Do I want to have 40% conversion on pitching the idea and having signed letters of intent or contracts? If you communicate well about every step in that system and everyone understands how the system is going to work, it's way easier because there's no fuzziness in the communication about that. And if you've gone through all the steps and you've created the system and everyone agrees, because it's not just one person creating this whole strategy, but if everyone agrees, then it's time to get a go from the executives and start or continue innovating by that system and by those guiding principles and by those fundamental rules. Because every time something is out of that scope or is out of that system, you either have a discussion or you just leave it out. And you can focus on doing the stuff that everyone committed to in that strategy. That, for me, was the last real explanation. And this is just an overview of all the steps that you want to take.
So by the end of this session, then luckily, because only the word innovation is already fuzzy to a lot of directors, CFOs, COOs, and all of them, and they don't like to be uncomfortable. They just want to be in their comfortable zone. But luckily, by having these 11 steps, and also luckily by your great involvement and your great interaction during the session, we really got more grasp on the importance of having an innovation strategy and how it really helps you to build that profitable or sustainable innovation portfolio with both financial growth as impact, because I think that's also very, very clear. As we have 1 minute left, maybe there's one last question, one last remark that one of you wants to add. As I believe we only have one slide left, because Maarten referred to the previous webinar that we hosted late in December 2021. Of course, we also have a new webinar coming up for you, which will be on sourcing and selecting, and which will be organized on April 25th. And that will be about how to source and select then the most promising ideas. Again, a very interesting topic, and it's then the next phase of the innovation funnel. So building on this webinar, we will go one step further in that innovation funnel and in that system. In the meantime, I did not get anything extra in the chat, so no more questions or remarks so far. And as it's very precisely 5:30, I would say thank you. Thank you for joining. Thank you for interacting. Thank you for listening. And we hope to see you back again at the next webinar, but also more importantly, we hope that you enjoyed this webinar together with us. Enjoy your evening, I would say.
Thanks a lot for being here.
Je bent de laatste, Dirk. Zal ik het zo doen? Je mag best unmute, toch?
Ja, weet ik. Ik ben al heel tijd aan het petsen en hij stond op die moment. Ik wilde al heel tijd typen, maar hij bleef hangen.
Oh,
Ah,
Dus,
thanks.
jullie bedankt. Superleuk.
Graag gedaan.
geen probleem. Fijne avond ook.
Wij blijven in contact, hè?
Zeker. Zeker.
Zeker. Ja, tuurlijk. Ja.
Ja.
Oké, doei.
Doei.
Ciao.
Fijne avond.
Fijne avond.
Ja, dit is wel een leuke foto voor de volgende webinar.